What's up, everyone? In this next video, we will be looking at several common AWS services and looking into their pricing models. So let's get into it. The ones we're going to be talking about are RDS, EC2, S3, CloudFront, and EBS. So starting with EC2. With EC2, you are charged for the capacity that you have provisioned. It's very important not to confuse this. Say you have an EC2 instance that you have that's been up for 2 hours, right? But it hasn't done anything. Maybe it's only done things for like a minute, right? Well, you're not going to be charged for that minute. You're going to be charged for those 2 hours. This is different than the model for a Lambda, which if it was just running for 1 minute, you'd only be charged for 1 minute. So that's why sometimes Lambdas can be much more cost effective than EC2, but obviously it varies on your use case. Again, as we talked about in the previous video, you reserve instances in advance for significant discounts. Right. And the spot instances, again, I mentioned in my previous video. This bottom point is just alerting you to the fact that if you're using an elastic load balancer, you have to be cognizant how that can affect your cost, essentially, because as you know by now, EC2, there's several services that work with EC2, right? So one of these, for example, is the load balancer. The load balancer is not a free service. While the load balancer is running, you will be being charged for the use of the load balancer. This is in contrast to, for example, CloudWatch, right? So CloudWatch is also a service that relates to your EC2, but you're not being charged while CloudWatch is running. However, if CloudWatch, for example, triggers auto-scaling, and auto-scaling spins up additional EC2 instances where you're going to be charged for the EC2 instances, but you're not going to be charged for auto-scaling nor for CloudWatch. So you kind of see how AWS does it. It's like CloudWatch and auto-scaling are services that can allow you to increase your EC2 instances, which is what you'll be charged for, as opposed to ELB, right? The load balancer does not incur additional charges as far as more EC2 instances, but it is a service in and of itself, so you will be charged for that. And then we have the elastic IPs. For the first IP is free, but usually if you have to use, I think, additional IPs, you are charged for those. The standard OSs and software packages that come with the Amazon AMIs, you don't have to pay additionally for those. However, if you want some custom or commercial software packages such as Microsoft SQL Server or something like an Oracle server, then you will have to either independently go and get those licenses, or you can acquire them directly through an AWS marketplace. All right, next service that we'll talk about is S3. So S3 pricing comes in two different, it's actually like 3 or 4 different tiers, but these are the most common ones. So one is called standard storage and the other is called standard infrequent access. You can see the only difference between these two is a 0.09% availability. In other words, with standard access, you want your data to be like callable like this, right? Because maybe it's accessed a lot and you can't really afford for it to be down or not available. However, with infrequent access, you recognize that you may not be accessing the data as much, so you're willing to pay less and have it be slightly less available. There's also like very similarly related concepts which is worth digging into. For example, like data that's not replicated across availability zones. I think it's called like single zone or something like that, in which you pay also less than the standard storage. But the standard storage is like it's the top, and then everything is less than that, you pay less for. So what are you actually paid for in S3? Well, you're paid first and foremost for the volume of the data that you're storing on S3, but then you're also paid data transfer rates, which is again out. So the number of requests and the amount of data transferred out of a given region all goes into your pricing, as well as different rate for the different types of requests, so a get versus a put or a copy. All right, next up, we talk about EBS, or Elastic Block Store. EBS is charged based on the provisioned gigabytes per month and the input outputs per second. So again, this concept of capacity and data transfer. Right? The type of EBS that you get will affect your price, so whether you get an SSD or whether you get magnetic. So each obviously has a different classification of performance and use cases, so you'll get charged, as I've written here. You can also get the provisioned IOPS, which is charged also with this given formula right here. One of the benefits of EBS is, of course, using snapshots to back up your data. Those snapshots also incur an additional charge. However, it's less than the actual EBS usage. Okay. The Relational Database Service, or RDS. This is charged a little bit differently because this is a managed service. You are actually charged based on the clock hours of server time that the database is running, as well as the different database characteristics, including its capacity, its latency, etc. As with EC2, you can reserve on a 1 to 3 year term for significant savings. A good practice for your database is to produce backups of it in case anything fails. So you're not actually charged additionally for the backup storage until after your database shuts down. After your database shuts down, then you're charged, you're billed on gigabytes per month. I think I've mentioned this previously based on the type and the capacity of your database, as well as, of course, as with everything, the amount of data that's transferred out. All right, next up is CloudWatch, or CloudFront. It's pretty self-explanatory. CloudFront is a service that is AWS's CDN service. There's going to be a lot of requests to it, right, and data transferred out. So based on the number of requests and the type of requests and the amount of data transferred is how you get billed on CloudFront. All right, that concludes a very quick overview of some of the most commonly asked about AWS services regarding price. I would encourage you to review more in depth the different tiers of S3 because you may be asked about that, or you probably will be asked something along those lines for the Cloud Practitioner exam. And then also, again, keep in mind that distinction between being charged for server runtime as opposed to simply server provisioning. The different services are charged differently.